All right, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michele Graglia, and this is Your Superior Self.
Mickey, my man. Um, I love talking to you. I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. I think you and I are on the same wavelength, and I appreciate you taking the time again.
Well, Trey, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So yeah, how's the book doing? You have a book, Ultra, like it when we first talked, I think it just came out, but now it's well into its course. Like, how's it doing?
Yep. It came out in June, mid-June, this past summer, and it's been a pretty incredible ride. I'm very, very excited and happy. The book is doing well. It's been more than anything, it's being received well, and the messages that I put out there and what I wanted to actually share in our chapters, and it's being received very well, and that's the most rewarding part, I would
Mm,
say, of the whole process. And we're about to launch the e version of the book came out, the actual hardcover, soft covers that already have been available, but now we're about to launch the Audible audio version of it. So it's a constant process of evolution, even on that side, and I couldn't be more grateful for everything that has come my way so far.
sure. At like what point in your journey though did you where you were like, I got a book in me, like this needs to be written down? Like, what part was that?
Well, that was actually quite a few years ago, because the initial draft, the initial book was actually published in Italy in 2017. So this is an adaptation of that version. And so, that came about 4 years ago. And so much has happened since then that I
Mhm.
actually kind of feel ready for another one already.
Ah, man, I know, right? Like, I mean, we just keep evolving. Our story keeps evolving and changing. I mean, your story is very powerful. You came to the States, right? Like you were, I don't know if you had a job, like you were working for your family business, right? And then you go to
Right. Yep.
Florida and you
Back in
meet.
Italy. And yeah, I decided to spend a few months really here in the country, expand the business, improve my English and all of that. And one fateful day, just strolling down South Beach, I happened to to meet this person, got scouted by this famous modeling agent, and basically, my life took a completely different turn right there, sliding door moments.
Mhm.
And, I basically drifted off the family business and started pursuing this whole new career that it was almost like one of those movie moments when things and big opportunity get presented to you, and started riding that wave. And it was phenomenal at the time, 24, 25 years old, and living it up in major cities, and kind of experiencing that good life that is portrayed in movies and and TVs and all of that stuff. And everything was great up until the moment when it was not anymore. And we can dive into that if you'd like.
Yeah, man. I think that's important because I think I think I connect with that too, right? Like I think we had talked before where that life, right? Like you're 21 through, I think your story changed at 27, but like a lot of
Right.
us had younger years, 21 through probably 30 and
Yep.
more so. Now you're seeing more people, even in 30s, like living that lifestyle of like
Yep.
going out partying, going to bars and like thinking that is the way of life, the way of happiness. But what I find it to be is just a lot of noise, right? Like it's just kind of
Yeah.
like you don't really know who you are. You're not really searching for that. And it's like an activity that you partake in because it takes your focus off what's really happening inside.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a big distraction. Though I think it's misleading for the fact that, we I think in a way we're raised with that belief that you need to have those things, have that material success. You have to pursue that certain career to hit a certain social status, to be partying it up and being with the glamorous people and do the glamorous things, so that you can, in a way, you validate your existence. But the more I dwelled into it, the more I dug into it, the more I felt drifting away from who I was, feeling alone, because those, at least for what I experienced in those circles, those are not really friendships, those are acquaintances. Those are people that hang around in those moments of whatever it is. But there's no substance to it. It's all very shallow. It's all very insignificant in a way. And so that's when I started perceiving that what I was doing wasn't purposeful, wasn't fulfilling. It was just the fun of the moment, because again, especially at that age, you're pursuing that one dream that you think you have to pursue, but then once you achieve it, once you live in it, then you realize that's not the answer. And so a lot of questions start popping up in your head, and that's when you need to answer those existential questions.
Yeah.
You have to face it.
Yeah. Got to face it. I mean, you faced it that night in New York after a party, hanging out with probably some celebrities.
Yep.
Probably dabbling in some extracurricular activities, and then not finding that source of happiness, and coming home and sitting outside your apartment window and just questioning your existence.
Yeah, that was probably, actually, undoubtedly the most critical time of my life. And in hindsight, I look back at it as a necessary part of my journey, because eventually brought me to discover who I wanted to be. Of course, it's always good to look back and assess that, but when you're in the moment, you feel very lost. You feel like there's no way out. You feel like there's no hope, and that's when depression kicks in. That's when dissatisfaction begins to creep in, and your life seems like it's going to waste. It feels like there's no way out. But just like in every challenging moment, there's always a way out. There's always, you can, even if you hit a rock bottom, that you can always look up, and eventually, if you have the courage inside you, you can pick yourself up and confront yourself, because that's ultimately what it is. It's like, if you're talking about it as in an existential level, in a philosophical level, it's about confronting the truth of ourselves, or the truth of our own existence. And once you, it's a very crazy thought. It's a very crazy and scary chapter of your life. But I think in a way or another, most of us, or if not all of us, have to come down to it, to give value to who we are and give meaning to what we do in our lives. And so to me, that moment of complete deep dissatisfaction became the opportunity to confront my fears and what I was going through at that moment, and simply understanding that I could have transcended my circumstances, though they were glamorous and beautiful and prepackaged very nicely. I just couldn't find fulfillment and purpose in that. And so I just came to the simple realization that I could just change. If I wasn't happy, I could have just changed. Didn't matter how scary or unreal it might have seemed at that moment, especially being in a place of privilege, let's call it that way. Because again, it's not like I was hitting rock bottom. It's not like, again, I was living up that lifestyle of drugs and alcohol, but it's not like I was a drug addict, or I was looking it up from a different perspective, where I already had achieved what I wanted to achieve, where I had basically made it to where they told me I should have gotten to be happy, and when I got there, I just wasn't.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I'm sure you get that with the book. It's like people get to that, what society says success is.
Yeah.
And then, like, you were talking about not being a drug addict. Well, you're socially participating in, like, whatever drugs or alcohol, just because that's
Yep.
what your environment is and that's what everybody's participating in.
Yep.
And people are like, for the moment, yeah, like, it distorts your reality. It makes you feel better because it mutes that self that's inside of you, that's crying out to you that this isn't everything. This isn't everything that there is. Like, there's more to you than what you think. but
Yep.
you don't see it. So it like it puts a mute button on that.
Yep.
And then the next day you feel like shit. And then
Yeah, right.
and then you're just kind of like questioning the universe, like, what am I here to do? Like you have
Yep.
obtained everything materialistically that you're supposed to obtain, but
Yeah.
yet the happiness factor is not there, or the fulfillment's not there. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, and I
Yep.
think your story is very valuable in that the message is that you can change your story, that you can change. It's the hero's journey. Like,
That's exactly
you
right.
know what I mean? Like everybody has to slay their own dragons. Everyone has to, like, your life, no matter who you are, is leading up to this point where
Yeah.
everything is happening for you, pushing you to that pivotal moment of realization of,
Yeah.
I can change the story if I want.
Yeah.
And that's
You can
exactly
change
what
a
you did.
narrative. Absolutely. And I think, I think this is a very worthwhile topic and message to get out, for the fact that at a wider level, the majority of the people in our society nowadays live in that limbo,
Hmm.
numbing out those feelings because that's just how it is. And, accepting the status quo without challenging uh, who you are, your beliefs, and the direction in life, it just leaves you in this sort of sense of, you're comfortable, but there's something is missing. So let's just numb it out with prescription drugs, alcohol, and whatnot, and just, you know, kind of put as you just said, like put those feelings on mute and just put it on the side. But we all know that it's a crippling feeling that will never leave you if you don't face it. And so it's a bit of a tricky spot,
Hmm.
because you can just be comfortable and kind of okay and numbing it out, or you can throw yourself out there, as we've been saying before, venture in the unknown, confront your fears, confront yourself, and eventually allow yourself to be who you want to be ultimately, and to do what you actually want to do, to live a life worth living. And I think there's no greater, you got to endure that hero's journey to become your own hero,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. I mean, because like we're taught, right, like early age, to look out for things outside of ourselves for those things that make us happy. And then it's like there's a crack in the foundation at some point where it's like those things aren't making me happy. So is everything that I've been told true? Right. Like that's when you have to go inward and find that true self, that true knowledge,
Yep.
that's the experience. And what
Yep.
I love about your story is that you did, like, you had to turn inward and you went and you researched different things and you had to find who Mickey was and you had to figure it out, what that looked like. You had to find your voice. And
Right.
finally you found running.
Yep.
And I don't know,
Ultra distance
ultra, I'm sorry, ultra. We're not talking about,
ultra distance running.
we're not talking about taking a small jog around the block. We're talking about 150 miles or more.
Yeah.
But that's like, I don't know another sport that you're by yourself, like you're deeply entrenched in like your own mindset. Like, you're battling the ego, you're battling the self, you're battling the
Yep.
pain, and you're coming out on the other side. It's almost like you're walking out of the fire.
It's a spiritual journey. That's what these ultra distances allow you to do, is to transcend your physicality, break through the barriers of the mind to truly tap into what we can call the higher self, the heart, the spirit, the soul. And I studied yoga in India, and I found so many similarities in between the practice of yoga, not just of course, not the physical part of the asanas, because the asanas can be compared to the act of running. It's a physical practice that allow you to break through the physical barriers and tap into the higher self, first through the mind, then reaching the soul. And astonishingly enough, as I was studying these practices, the different limbs of yoga, that is not just the asanas, but the whole practices behind it, starting from the shakarma practices to the pranayama and mudras and mantras and all of these things, it really opened up my eyes to the fact that I was already experiencing these things while doing these crazy races. And so I was like, there has to be something there So these people, these Vedic people, the yogis, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, doing the asanas in the forest, they were already understanding that transcending your physicalities, you can get in touch with that greater energy, that cosmic energy, the universal energy, which we are all part of. And so to me, it almost became like a revelation that what I'm doing is just a different physical practice, though the direction, we're coming from different points, different practices, different means, but the direction is the same. And so that almost became like a new life journey, tapping into that, destroying the physical barriers that we are bound by, not necessarily by our physical self, but the belief that are basically passed on, that we are indoctrinated by. Because let's be real, from the moment we're born, we're put into boxes, we're told what we can or what we cannot do. You cannot go past those limits because it's never been done, because it's dangerous, because this, because of that. And so oftentimes we just accept the status quo and we don't even challenge those beliefs. We just accept it. And that's absolutely limiting on a social level, on a personal level, and on an evolutionary level, because you just don't want take the chance because they tell you can't. So how about we change the narrative there, and we find ourselves in the position of being able to go past those limitations, to find out for ourselves how far we can actually go. And so that's driven by curiosity, that's driven by desire, that's driven by the necessity to expand ourselves and grow and discover more and find out what we are capable of. And that to me is absolutely fascinating.
Well, when you were in India, like practicing yoga, like, did you experience that higher self during those practices?
I didn't.
No.
To be honest, I didn't, for the fact that we were in an ashram. There was, a good amount of people, and the practices that we were doing, in my opinion, we were practicing over 12 hours a day. So it was 6 a.m. in the morning to 8 p.m. at night, with very little breaks for very small meals. So we're almost like on a intermittent fasting type of practice for over a month. So it was, it was absolutely challenging. But because of what I already experienced in my running journey, I wasn't able to tap into something bigger just because the time wasn't enough. I think you need to, you're not gonna transcend yourself doing an hour and a half of ashtanga or whatever. It really requires an outstanding amount of time and effort to break through that. And to me, I only discovered that, I only tap into that running after 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 hours. And the deeper you go, the longer you go, the deeper it gets, or the higher it gets. It's almost like funnily enough, it's almost like a trip. It's like a journey.
Sure.
It's not gonna happen at the first mile. You gotta go and break through those barriers. And it's absolutely painful. But it's only transcending the physicality that you can tap into that. And nowadays, the societal trends take us well in the opposite direction. We are constantly striving to find comfort and security. And those are the enemies of what we're talking about. You're never going to be able to transcend yourself being in a comfortable position. You need to strip down. You got to get stripped down to your core to actually listen to the heart. Otherwise, there's just noise around.
Yeah, you got that static noise. I mean, you really have to jump in the fire.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You got to jump in the fire and
that's exactly right.
burn that self and step out, and be anew, right? Like, So when you were experiencing that for yourself, like, I mean, obviously you didn't know that that was going to lead to these different states of
Right,
consciousness. Like,
right.
what was your first experience with that? Was that when you ran the Key West Ultra, or was that when you were in the, what was it, the Tundra? Like, when was that for you, and what did it look like?
You know, just like everything, it's a process. You know, it's a process of discovering. It's a process of understanding. Because when the first time I experienced this type of thing was probably after my first 100 miler, where I started getting hallucinations. Like it's the brain begins to release DMT naturally. There is visions, there are hallucinations, there is a sense of transcendence, but it's almost like meditation. You're not gonna understand it the first 1, 10, 100 times or more
Mhm.
that you're doing it, but with time, with tapping into that feeling, that realm, let's say that, you begin to navigate it and understand what it is. And so the same thing there, the first races, I knew something was happening, but I didn't know what it was because my mind, I was still driven by the mind.
Mhm.
And the mind is it's driven literally by the ego. It's bound by the ego. And so I was interpreting those moments as simply a physical reaction. I wasn't allowing myself to let go and feel that
Yeah.
other bigger thing
Yeah.
above it.
The
And so,
cosmos.
yeah, exactly that. And, after a few years, then when reaching that point, I begin to tap into the higher feeling, the higher self. And once you do that, you are stripping down even the mental barriers. You're no longer bound by what I need to do, the position that I need to get because I want to win that race so that I can reach a higher social status, so that I can be more recognizable, so that I can make more money. So those are all noise. That's just noise. That's just the ego telling you what he wants to do to achieve something, but you're no longer striving to achieve. You're just simply experiencing yourself in one of the most unique uh, moments that you can gift yourself, and that's transcending yourself and tapping into that um, infinite energy. There's no sense of self. There's no longer a sense of pain and boundary. You're simply fully present, fully aware, fully conscious on that moment. And what I found out is that once I tap into that, once I'm able to tap into that, it's never a given. No matter how many times I've done it, it always requires a great deal of pain, enduring a great deal of pain, enduring a great deal of discomfort to eventually transcend all of that and begin to be fully present. Just like I said, you begin to be fully present, and there is no sense of um, restraint. It's a very difficult concept. Once you're driven by the mind, you're in a path of resistance. When you're driven by the heart, you
Mm,
enter a state of flow.
I love that. So, like, what types of information are you getting? Like, when you transcend the self, like, is it this certain feeling of knowing, or is it information downloads? Is it like, kind of, are you getting direct messages that you need to, that will later in your path, like, benefit you? Like, what type of information are you getting?
The information that come through is the fact that we are bound by our beliefs, but that we're bound by the perceived limitations. So if I tell you can only run 10 miles, you're going to run 10 miles, maybe 9.9. And then you tell me, oh, I can do 10.1 because that's been instilled in your head. It's a seed planted in there. And so once you are able to break through those barriers, that's when you begin to fully live. And this is, talking about it from a, runner perspective, experiencing through running. But this could be achieved just sitting. This could be achieved doing anything in life. And the lessons that you get from that is the fact that we are unbounded, that we can truly be and do whatever we set our minds to. But the one narrative that I'm changing is the fact that in our society we often and the trend right now is stressing the power of the mind. I think that the true power lies well beyond the mind. The mind is a great servant, but a terrible master. We know this. You cannot allow the mind to make decisions because it always going to take the easy way out. That's an evolutionary pattern. So to truly tap into the higher self, to truly tap into the higher energy, you need to release the mind.
Mhm.
You need to let the mind go, not control. Stop being egocentric, stop being ego driven. Rather, release all those influences that are outside, and you begin to switch the focus from outward inward. It's only then that you can be your best. It's only then you can be fully focused on what you need to do and who you want to be and what you can actually accomplish. And so to me, that became almost like a revelation, like I said before, because there's no miles don't matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. And so this is the first step.
I
This is the
think
first step.
I think you're so spot on with that. So I was meditating and I had like some insight, which isn't all the time. It's just sometimes I can go deeper in my meditations, even with running. I can tap into that self a little bit more. But this meditation was so insightful because it was like I can't remember exactly. I've written it down somewhere in my journal, but it was like the brain had to evolve to steal the power from the heart. Like if you think about our ancient like physiology of our human race, like the brain had to evolve into this new prefrontal cortex, this
Yep.
self to steal power from the heart, which is true knowledge,
Yep.
true knowledge of self.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And we live here, but in reality, the knowing and the aspects of ourselves that are higher and so much more knowledgeable and
Yep.
interconnected with the universe is here. Like
Yep.
this is the
The
bridge.
truth,
The
the
truth.
cosmic truth. Yeah.
But you tell people that, right? You tell people that, and they're like, "What are you talking about, dude? Like, what are you talking about?"
Well, it's we are raised in a way that we are mind driven. It's inevitable. And so when you start talking about these metaphysical concepts, it's intangible. You cannot explain it because it's almost like if you wanted to explain faith or whatever belief you have. The only difference is, if we're tapping into religious beliefs, those are human construct,
Mhm.
human interpretations of what spirituality should be. There is knowledge in all religions, but there's no truth in any of them.
Mm. People are like, "What? What?"
Yeah, and here I'm not, I don't want to talk about religions because I'm not a spiritual leader of any sort, but I think that our generation is sort of uh, scraping through those top layers of what it's been indoctrinated through centuries, and we're beginning to express ourselves and open up our minds to those higher concepts. Spirituality doesn't need to be bound by human construct, human indoctrination, human beliefs, because as you just say, those are driven by the mind. Those are concepts that we created. But if you actually break through those concepts that we created and we allow the heart to speak, the soul knows the truth, the universal truth. And it's almost like saying, talking about laws. Just because a certain law is accepted and supported by the majority doesn't mean that it's the truth, the
Mhm.
cosmic truth, right,
Mhm.
of what is right and what is wrong. And so those things are in, like, naturally, always you can find it within ourselves. We know when we do something wrong. We know when we do something right. We don't need to see if it's lawful or unlawful. So there are certain ways that those are just triggering points. Those are just little examples. But if we want to talk even deeper about all of this, the society keeps us bound by our materialistic self. It doesn't allow us um, to dig deeper to find out how powerful we actually are.
Sure.
And I think, here we're starting to get into like very difficult waters, but we can go as far as you like.
I love it, dude. I like these topics because it's like people need to start thinking about that. I'm a big fan of having
Yeah.
your own experience, like
Yeah.
not believing what people have told you your entire life.
Right.
Like it's nice to know that, right? Like your parents told you something that they know that their parents told them, or you went to church and they've been preaching this
Yeah.
doctrine for centuries that had to originate somewhere. But people were, I've learned to kind of open myself up and have an open mind about everything and just kind of like follow my heart and where it needs,
Yeah.
where I need to research a little bit more, or what feels good to me and what doesn't feel good to me. And then that's like your emotions, like that feeling, that heart centered feeling when you're on to something is your higher self saying to you, you need to look more into this. Like, this is where you need to go. Like, exactly what you need to be doing and and when
Yeah.
you start trying to analyze something, that's when you're you're doing what this society has done for so many years.
Yeah.
I mean, just religiously, like, people talk about, channel text, right? People are like, oh, well, that's evil. What about the
Right.
Bible, right? Like how did that become about? It was inspired in the heart of man from God, right? So that means it was a channel text, apparently, right? Like it was
Right.
everything's channel. Like right now, who's speaking, right? Like it's all from one source, and it's kind of
Right.
like the way that you find out your truth is through your own experience. It's not through what your parents told you or what
Yeah.
Mickey's telling you or Trey's telling you. It's how am I experiencing? What is my subjective experience right now? What is my deep gut feeling about this? And how does that relate to my life? And that's how you kind of even flow through your journey, and then living in the moment and knowing that this body is not you and who you are. And when I say that, just think for a second, ask yourself the question, am I aware? And then that right there, that feeling of kind of like, yes, I am the seer, I am not the doer, I am the
Yep.
seer. That is your true being. Like,
Yep.
once you can realize that, then you start kind of expanding your consciousness, your awareness a little bit more. And now you can
Yep.
kind of be in the present moment daily and see how your reality, your external environment is a direct reflection about how you're doing in here.
Yep.
So it's like a
That's
mirror.
absolutely. We're speaking the same language. That's absolutely right. Yeah. What happens outside doesn't matter. And this is what I think it applies to, or at least that's what I learned from ultra running. It's just witnessing what's going on. It's almost like, I'm very much into Oriental philosophy, Buddhism, Taoism, all of that. Though I don't necessarily, attach or recognize myself in any of those, but I think there is truth. There is some truth in all of them, and there's one saying that is very fitting to that. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Hmm.
The pain is there in the journey, and it's your choice to either stop when it comes or just witness it as part of the process, as part of the journey. You put yourself out there doing this thing, and pain is going to be a necessary part of it. You're going to go through it, but the suffering in itself is a mental concept. You are suffering, so you're suffering. You can decide to just accept pain as for what it is, which is physical discomfort, but the suffering is a mental thing. So you can just let it happen, accept it, and go through it, and just have it as part of the journey, as an inevitable part of the journey. Or you can let the suffering take over and stop you in your steps. And that's when you give up. So you see, the mind is always on a path of restraint. It's always on a path of resistance, because doesn't matter how mentally strong you are, you're always going to fight against the current. So accepting it, on the other hand, will allow you to simply flow through it and accept it for what it is. And that's, that connects to what you're saying. It's the outside, what happens outside doesn't matter. The thoughts, the problems, the things that come through, they're just like clouds, but you don't recognize yourself in the clouds because you're the sky. You're something much higher than that. So it's about clearing up the thoughts, clearing up the negative clouds, and let the sun shine through.
That's beautiful.
Let the sun shine through. Sorry.
That's beautifully said, man. That's awesome. No, I mean, because you're exactly right. Like, because of the pain, it draws us in closer to it, right? Because of the suffering. But you got to go through both to experience happiness. Like,
yeah.
Like God had to experience himself as man to truly say that he had this experience. Like he had to go through the sadness, which is just it's just a feeling. Happiness is just a feeling, but it's an experience that you have, that you collect. That's why we're here, is for the experience.
Yeah.
Like you have to go through these lows to to realize and recognize the highs.
Yep.
But like the one thing about Buddhism, what I really like, I don't identify myself as any type of religious
right
person, right? Like I find myself a seeker, right, of my
yep.
own, for my own being, my own self, my own knowledge. And what I do like about what the Buddha said about the middle way, right? Like he had, like during his journey, he saw somebody, playing this instrument, and the guitar chord where he struck it, and it was like, if it's too loose, it won't play. If it's too tight, it will break. Like the middle way is the way that, of like through suffering or something like that. And
yeah,
it's kind of like the same thing where it's like, you can't be too happy, you can't be too sad. It's like in the middle there. I mean, but it's suffering, like you said. If you identify with it, it's going to pull you into that, and you're not going to be able to get out of it. It's like quicksand.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep. The more you struggle, the more it's going to pull you down. The more you fight it, the more it's going to pull you down. So yeah, that pretty much, that's a lesson that I learned through running, but it can be very much applied to life in general.
Well, let me ask you this,
go
right?
through this. What's that?
So I was going to ask you this. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no,
before I forget, because I'll forget this, and like with running, right? Like with that ego, with obviously we're still here in this body, in this vehicle. Like it is hard. It's hard not to stay in the moment sometimes, right? Especially when you are in a competitive sport like ultra running. Like, how do you kind of walk that line of like, all right, I'm not doing this from an ego standpoint, I'm doing this for my journey, but then do you fall into those like, egotistical kind of mindset sometimes where you're like, I got to be better than this and that?
Well, that's a tricky question, for the fact that, yeah, it is, you're racing. When you're doing this type of challenges, it's a race. So if you're an athlete, you want to do well, you want to win, you want to outperform the other people. But the one thing that I kind of transformed through the years was my perspective towards it. In the beginning, it was absolutely, I want to win because I want to get sponsored so I can get paid, so I can pursue this, which in a way, it's a noble way of seeing it, because you're doing it to be able to pursue a certain lifestyle that you love, and so there's nothing wrong with that. But with time, it kind of started draining me, for the fact that I was driven by an outside goal, by an outside result, and these type of challenges, they are monumental. Sometimes they're absolutely challenging. They're tough challenges. And so if the meaning that you give to it, if the reward that you're searching for is outside of you, it's only going to last this long. Mm-hmm. For the fact that you're going through so much that you need to have a higher reason to do it. And so to me, that transformed into a personal quest of finding out what I'm capable of pushing past all the limits that I thought possible, and getting out there for myself. So when I do toe the line of a race nowadays, I don't do it thinking about, I actually don't even check who's there. I don't even check the starting line, because I don't need to know. I cannot predict, or I cannot control how you trained, how you were going to race, how you're going to feel that day. So already all these thoughts would bring me outside of myself, would bring my focus outward, because I'm thinking about you, how you're gonna perform, how I'm gonna keep up, how I'm gonna drop you if you're not feeling well. You see, all of these gimmicks, they're all mental gimmicks. It's all ego-driven things that brought us outside ourselves. It brought us outside our focus. And so to me, changing the perspective of I'm not racing against other people, I'm racing against myself and the course. Now it changes the whole narrative. I'm not, if you start out and you gain gap, you create a gap in between you and I, there's nothing I can do about it. All I can do is give my best in this moment, and then in the next moment. So here brings back a certain level of meditation, of presence, of awareness, of doing the best that I can in this very moment. I'm not stressing about you. I'm not stressing about how hard it's been to get here. I'm not worrying about how many miles I still have ahead, because everything is out of my control. All that I can control is right here, right now. That's my mantra going most of these challenges. I try to stay very present, controlling what I can control, which is my state, my physical, mental environment. Try to keep it calm, try to keep it unpolluted, try to keep it as fresh as I can, because if I give the very best of myself in every given moment, the sum of all those moments, of all those steps, eventually will allow me to reach the finish line. And if I do that better than you, then eventually I'll beat you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the whole, that's how it morphed throughout the years.
Do you find it hard to be around, like, I don't know, because I feel like you and I are in the same like wavelength, just like in life, in this reality that we're in. Like, do you find it hard to be around like most people? Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, for me, it's like,
Yes, by the way. Absolutely, yes.
I don't know what it is. It's not like it's not better than feeling. It's just kind of like, I see the suffering that other people put them in. I mean, I don't mean like suffering, like, sickness and illness. Yes, definitely, for sure. But like the tricks that the mind play on people, like materialistic things, like I see the suffering that people go through.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not like I feel sorry for them. It's just kind of like, when will they reach their journey, right? Or when will they reach their hero's journey? Like, kind of like, I don't know if that makes sense.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't think it's coming from a knowing better. I think it's about an experiencing yourself and questioning dogma and indoctrination. I think the majority of people are very much stuck into that dogma, into that indoctrination of spirituality, of way of life, the way society is. You don't challenge it, you don't question it, so you just accept it, even if it makes you feel like shit. Sorry.
You're good, man.
But
You're good.
you know what I mean? It's you don't question it, because that's the status quo. So if the majority of people do that, think like that, then it's got to be right. But from the other perspective, it becomes almost like you are deep asleep. You're not even trying to open up your eyes. You're not even thinking about questioning what it is that you're accepting. And so you live in that kind of whirlpool of fog and fear and whatever it is, and you just accept it. It's part of that comfortable zone that it still makes you uncomfortable, but you accept it as comfortable as false sense of security, because once you begin questioning your beliefs, that's scary.
Sure.
Those are hard waters to tread. Those are hard thoughts to entertain and to challenge. And so it's not about knowing better, but it's about opening up the eyes.
It's seeing the truth. Yeah, it's seeing the truth, right?
And trying to see the truth. So oftentimes I say it could be better. You're living in that pond, and you don't question about the oceans on the other side because all you know is that pond. But if you actually get out there, it's a scary thought, and a lot of people don't want to entertain that.
Sure. I mean, I think some people are just so deeply rooted in their beliefs. Like you say one thing, like, hey, you are awareness, you are that consciousness, and it
Yeah.
freaks them out. Like you see like this
Yeah.
overload, like smoke coming out of the ears. Like, what
Yeah.
are you
Yeah.
talking about? What are you talking about? And it's kind of like, but that sparks security. Like, I don't know if there's anything that you or I could say to someone like that, so deeply indoctrinated that they would even change their beliefs. It's kind of like you put that energy out and you allow them to be around that, and you just kind of spark curiosity in somebody.
Yeah.
And then once they become thirsty, like there's like they're going to go down this rabbit hole of curiosity, of like research, like you've done, like I've done, like most people have done, that have kind of, it's not even about seeking truth. It's about seeking your truth, like what it
Yeah.
is that is your truth, because you're the only one that's going to be able to decipher that for yourself and translate that into your own subjective experience. Like, I don't know, my reality is what I perceive here, right? Like everything right here. And what is reality really? I mean, if you do research on quantum physics, I mean,
Yeah.
that will blow your mind, let alone, you know what I mean? Like, and my favorite thing, we just had a what was it, like I'm majoring in psychology right now, and my professor was like, he wasn't he was still trying to be a scientist, but he was like, think about the Bible. He was like, God created Earth in 7 days. How did he do that? If it, because the Earth has to rotate one full day for it to be a day. If it wasn't fully created, how did it rotate? And then how did you know what I mean? Like, how did it take 7 days
Well,
if it
yeah,
wasn't fully created? But anyway, I just
there are
feel
a
like,
few gaps and holes, but
well, even
let's just
like,
go over it.
I know, right? But I'm not putting down religion. I think it's important for people to have a foundation, right? But
Right.
you got to have that foundation. Just going back to the whole concept of, you got to experience sadness and happiness. You got to experience that foundation of dogma to
Yeah.
break out of it, because you're going to see what that is, and you're going to think that's your truth, and then you're going to evolve out of that, and you're going to find your truth, not Christianity's truth, not Muslim's truth, not
Yeah.
Jewish truth. You're going to
The
find
cosmic truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's something that unfortunately, those are conversations that you have to really be aware of, and who you entertain it with. I don't think, these are type of concepts and beliefs and ideas that challenge their own beliefs, that challenge the status quo, that challenge the way we've been indoctrinated for centuries, if not more. And so, you cannot explain it. You cannot, one person have to strive to get out there and do it on their own. You cannot show it. If you don't see it, you cannot show it to them. So it needs to start from within yourself. It's as you just said, it's a personal journey. The one astonishing thing, though, is the fact that there are common patterns. So as we were saying, as you begin to transcend the dogmatic beliefs, then you begin to release those boundaries that kept you there, that kept you bounded, literally, and you allow to express yourself, to experience yourself at a higher level. And there are common traits, commonalities, certain experiences that are that reach the same higher understanding of consciousness, of awareness, of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the most that sorry, my dog just rolled in. She has something to say about this.
He's trying to tell us the cosmic truth. I get it.
Exactly.
Yes.
She's like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Bark twice if we are consciousness.
And so, the fascinating part is the fact that once you tap into that spirituality, that spiritual journey, we are all experiencing or getting a taste of the higher self, of the higher consciousness, of the higher belief. And I think that's going to be it's going to be amazing to see, in my opinion, the journey of our whole, of the humanity going forward. Because here we've been talking about everything but running, but since we're at it, I just finished the thought of the fact that I think the necessary step of our future is transcending our cultural differences, our dismantling our religious beliefs and tapping into this greater spirituality that brings us all together, because ultimately we are all divided. And that's one of the main reasons why I believe that religion is not the answer, because the more we are bound by our religious belief, the more we're going to be against other line of thoughts, against other philosophy, against other mental human construct that don't depict the truth. And so dismantling that will allow all of us as a whole to reach a higher understanding of who we are and what we're doing on this beautiful planet of ours.
Yeah. Who's not to say that my awareness isn't you on the other side of this camera looking right back at me? You know what I mean?
That's exactly right. Well, we're speaking the same language already. So
the only difference is your name is Michele,
right.
and my name is Trey.
But that's another human construct.
I know, right? It's what I've been told, right? Like little babies do it all the time, right? Like they, my daughter, when she was growing up, she would say, hold you. What she was trying to say is hold me, right? But she's saying hold you because she has no concept of self, she has no concept of who I am.
Right. So, but that's something that is instilled in us, the moment we are put in a desk in school, and then in the desk at work, and then in the desk here, a desk there, we are confined. And that's what I think it's the liberating part of this journey, transcending these patterns and grow into who you truly are.
Yeah, I had a guest on the show, and she was like, next time you're running, I want you to think about this. So
yeah,
her name is Abiola Abrams, and she's in New York. And she said, we were talking about recognizing who we truly are. There's a great quote from Suzanne Giesemann. She was like, you're not the waves, you're not the ocean, you are the ocean waving. And then Abiola was like, whenever you look at a mountain, you're looking at yourself. Like, so when you're going out there running, and you're running these in Utah, you're running in the tundra, you're running in Miami or wherever, like you see a mountain, or you see something that is like the sunrise, the sunset on a beach, like you're looking at your reflection, that conscious awareness of cosmic being, like that is what you're looking at. That's who you are. And it's just, I don't know. It's like the mind can't conceive that, can't even process that, right? Because it wants to be the self, but the heart, that's where the truth is. That's what's saying, yes, you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
What I mean? But this has been awesome, dude. I know we haven't talked about running much, but
it was much better.
How often do you talk? Do you talk about, like, have you talked about this stuff on other shows? Like, do you talk about that type of stuff, like outside
there has been one podcast that I did recently, recently, about a month ago, that the person was actually very much into this type of concepts and this type of ideas. And we had just like we had a very good conversation, because again, it's about questioning what it is and discussing openly what we experienced.
Sure.
And so, there are some fundamental truths that you cannot hide. And so it's pretty fascinating, in my opinion, to be able to tap into that rather than tell you how fast I'm running, or I think there's much more value. There's much more value in this type of approaches, for the fact that it's I would say, if you allow me, it's for the greater good, because this type of understanding, this type of I don't want to say lessons, but concepts, they can allow all of us to live a much more meaningful and full life. Sure. Much more connected with ourselves, with the people around us, with the whole world. Because the more you experience yourself, the more you connect within, the more you understand that you're connected without. And so the moment you start off I think everything begin from, everything sparks out of being centered with yourself, loving yourself, and be grateful for where you are, what you have, what's going on in your life. And once you do that, you inevitably open up to a kind of version of yourself. And that is the one key to bettering the world. You got to start with yourself, begin being better with yourself, with other people. And if every single one of us does that, it makes the circle around the world. And we
man.
already better the world in the
Yeah.
way that we were saying when we were kids,
Absolutely. You got to be like a kid to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? I think that's written somewhere.
And that's I think the almost like the phrase that brings us all the dots together. A kid, just like we're saying, doesn't have all these preconceptions indoctrinated,
mm-hmm.
Conditioned.
Mm-hmm.
It's a social conditioning that we get from the moment we grow up. And so that brings us to attach to certain dogmas rather than the certain ways of living. And that distracts you from the truth of your existence. Because again, then you start playing the societal game. But stepping back to your kid self, it's acting out of the heart, unbounded,
having
true
fun, man. Yeah,
and so much fun.
Having fun,
so much lighthearted.
And you know what I mean? Like being that true self. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Mickey, man, like this, I can talk to you for days.
Likewise, yeah.
How can people find more about you?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty much on all social platforms, though I'm more active on Instagram. You can find me at Mickey, Mickey, and my last name is Graglia, Graglia, or my website, michelegraglia.com. And there's also, you can find a bunch of fun facts and race results and how to purchase the book and whatnot. So yeah, if you're interested or would like to learn more, I invite you to check that out.
Awesome, man. I really truly enjoyed this conversation, man. Like I think that these are important conversations. This is like putting that, combining energy systems and like putting that force out into the world, like you were talking about, and connecting all the dots.
Yep.
So yeah, man, thank you so much for joining the show, brother.
Well, great pleasure. Thanks a lot.